We'll start. My name is Hildegard Lingnau. I'm the Executive Secretary of GFAR, Global Forum on Agricultural Research and Innovation. And I'm super happy to welcome you to this innovation. This is an innovation, and as all innovations struggle with setbacks, so did we. And apologies again for what happened to our first premiere when we suffered some IT challenges. This is an innovation to use GFAR Talks, a new webinar, to make best use of GFAR's global forum and its global platform, to put farmers center stage and to support them in gaining stronger agency and voice to play their most important roles. This was again recognized and emphasized by the UN Food System Summit last year. And this is what the Global Forum on Agricultural Research and Innovation is all about. We are very grateful to Dr. Ismahane Elouafi, the Chief Scientist of FAO, and to Dr. Namukolo Covic, lead author of an article which I would really like to recommend to you for reading, to kickstart this debate series and to help us disentangle the UN Food System Summit, and by doing so, helping us acting together to achieve the very much needed transformation of the agro-food system. So with this, welcome, and let's have a lively debate. Thank you. Back to you, Syed.
Thank you. Thanks, Hildegard. And I'm not sure if we have anyone from YPAD, but if we do, let me ask if there could also be a few words of introduction or welcome from you. If not, let me just on your behalf say a co-host of this series is the Young Professionals for Agricultural Development. And this is one of the issues that is critical to GFAR, is to expand the network and to build a community so that we include all communities and all interest groups in this network. I couldn't be more excited personally about both hosting and moderating this event, but also in particular the speakers that we have. And I'm thrilled really to have such wonderful speakers at this inaugural talk. So let me just keep my words to a minimum, just a couple of words about housekeeping or the sequence that we're going to follow. We will have the speakers, but we also want to engage as much as possible with you. And therefore, we're actually thrilled that over 150 people have registered for this event. And we will get as many questions as we can in. So please use the Q&A function. You won't see your question, you won't see everybody else's questions, but we will endeavor to get as many of your questions in so that our speakers can actually respond directly to you and we can actually engage in that discussion and obviously identify issues for follow-up from the comments that people make. So please use that opportunity. As you will notice, we're speaking in English, and this is the event that currently this event will be entirely in English. There will be a YouTube version for you and your colleagues who are not able to attend today, and that YouTube version will be edition will be available by Friday of this week, and it will be provided, and information will be provided through GFAR's social media. So please look out for that, and please make sure that as many of your colleagues who are not able to attend today will be able to see this talk in its entirety by Friday of this week. Now, let me just turn to the purpose of these talks and specifically to this one, but essentially the GFAR Talks providing a showcase for debate on challenging and provocative topics related to agri-food systems transformation. And so transformation is the key word in this, but it's really to deal with complex issues. And that's one of the biggest issues that we're going to face, is the complexity of the food system and how we're going to address it. In particular for this talk, it's entirely appropriate that we can now refer to the United Nations Food System Summit, which was held on the 23rd of September last year under the auspices of the United Nations and the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. So just let me remind you so that you're up to speed on what really the purpose of the Food System Summit was. It was to actually empower all people to leverage the power of food systems to drive recovery from the pandemic and to really get us back on track for the SDGs and the Sustainable Development Goals, And of course, it's all 17, but we can pick it of those. The first two, SDG 1, zero poverty, and SDG 2, improve food security and improved nutrition. And within the context of SDG 13, climate action, and of course, the partnership for the goals, SDG 17. So that's really our framework. At this point, if we say the outcomes were for actionable commitments by heads of government and other constituency leaders, and I think that's really what we're going to reflect on today. What were the actionable commitments? And through that, how do our speakers today see from the summit what happens next? Where are we now? And where are those actionable commitments? And where do they feel we should now be coordinating our efforts collectively to actually achieve those goals? Now, at this point, I'm going to introduce both speakers together, and then I'm going to ask the first of them, Ismahane Elouafi, to speak, and then immediately afterwards, Dr. Namukolo Covic to speak. Then we will have our discussion in which your questions will be the priority for me, and then I'll hand over to the chair of GFAR, Dr. Ravi Ketapal, to make some concluding comments. So that's really our sequence for today. Now, let me introduce, first of all, an honor to be able to have Dr. Ismahane Elouafi, Chief Scientist of the Food and Agriculture Organization, with nearly 2 decades of experience in agricultural research and development in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Dr. Elouafi is known for promoting neglected crops and non-freshwater in agriculture, and particularly women in science. Dr. Elouafi has been a member of numerous boards and research institutes. Her contributions to science have been recognized with prestigious awards and accolades, including the Excellence in Science Award from the Global Thinkers Forum. So our first speaker will be Ismahane, but let me also introduce our second speaker, who will speak immediately afterwards. Dr. Namukolo Covic is the Director General's representative to Ethiopia for the International Livestock Research Institute, ILRI. She's a food systems expert with a multidisciplinary academic background that spans crop science and extension, animal and poultry science, and human nutrition, that has made her uniquely positioned to address dynamics of food systems transformation from different fronts. Namukolo is recognized for ability to link diverse stakeholders on interlinkages of research, policy, and program processes. So we really are honored to have two such eminent speakers. Let me ask first Dr. Ismahane Elouafi to make her introductory presentation. Ismahane.
Thank you very much, dear Sayed. Really a pleasure to be with you today. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening to colleagues. And I'm glad we are convening, and I'm glad really to see GFAR coming back to life and being very active. So ladies and gentlemen, it's really my pleasure to be here with you today as we reflect on both the challenges, but also the opportunities that come with the sustainable agri-food system transformation. I think we all agree that our agri-food system are at the heart of the 2030 development agenda and sustainable development goal. Our agri-food system are expected to achieve an increasing number of multiple co-benefits, and such complexities and the fact that each system is so context specific means we need the science and the data to determine which are the optimal options and solution for the different stakeholder groups. We must drive stronger connections between the food system agenda, the climate change agenda, and the biodiversity agenda, given the interdependency of these. I think the UN Food System Summit, the COP26, and the CBD COP15, they're all important milestones that will help us in driving forward the transformative agenda. And in that, 2021 was a very special year, not only because of COVID and the disasters that we had worldwide, but mainly because these agendas aligned themselves better than ever. So the first ever UN Food System Summit held last year served as a capstone moment for an 18-month process and successfully elevated the discourse and the political relevance of food system on the global agenda in all countries. 5 action areas emerged from the summit process, with several multi-stakeholders initiative and coalition emerging under each of those action areas to champion an integrated systemic approach at scale to address specific issues related to food systems. Commitments were made to take action to build healthier, more sustainable, and more equitable food systems. As a result of the National Food System Summit Dialogue, member states have developed or are developing national pathways for food system transformation. A food system coordination hub is being established at FAO to maintain the momentum and advance the deliverable that emerged through the summit. The core function of the hub will be to coordinate and facilitate the technical and policy support of the UN system and beyond to implement national food system pathways. It will bring together and link food system knowledge and expertise from diverse constituencies, including through a stakeholder advisory group to support national progress on the SDGs in response to the country priorities. The hub will stay connected with the broader ecosystem of actors for sustainable food system, including coalitions, but also other initiatives, as well as the science ecosystem, and promote the better integration of these efforts with country demand. The hub, as you know, will be hosted by FAO on behalf of the UN system. An oversight of the hub will fall on a steering group comprised by the principals or the heads of the 3 Rome-based agencies, in addition to DCO and UNEP as the initial chair of an evolved UN task force. So these 5 are really the members of the steering committee, but there will be a rotational role as well. With its strength, unique expertise, and wealth of experience in sustainable development, FAO is well positioned to host the Food System Coordination Hub on behalf of the UN system. FAO technical divisions, regional offices, and country offices will support the implementation of the country-level transformation pathways within the FAO Strategic Framework 2022 to 31. At FAO, we know that if we want to achieve the 4 betters, better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life leaving no one behind, we cannot do so alone. We must act together, and we have to do it now. As we all know, 2030 is just around the corner. If we think about it in terms of agriculture cycle, we are less than 9 cycles away from it. Technology and innovation are 2 of the 4 accelerators in FAO strategic framework, together with data and complements. And we mean by complement the governance, the human capital, and the institution. Within that, harnessing science and technology and innovation is key for leveraging emerging opportunities for reaching a world free from poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. FAO is integrating science, technology, and innovation to provide solutions that address the 3 dimensions of sustainability. To bring FAO initiative into a coherent framework and to facilitate the development of new initiatives, we are developing FAO first ever science and innovation strategy that will help strengthen the use of science and innovation in FAO technical intervention and normative guidance, and will serve as a key tool for the implementation of our strategic framework for the next decade. My office has embarked on a few initiatives, 3 of which I would like to highlight today. One of the roles of my office is to strengthen dialogue on science, including by developing knowledge and expertise, and bring to bear the foremost science-based evidence on cross-sectorial, multidisciplinary priority issues related to agri-food system at the global level. Engaging on issues that are contentious and have presented communication challenges is thus very imperative. In this vein, we have commissioned an issue paper on gene editing technologies, and we will have a series of papers to really develop with scientists across the world on many contentious issues. We have chosen gene editing as a breakthrough technology that I think will affect tremendously not only agri-food system, but also international development, as well as alleviation of poverty and malnutrition. Another role, the second one that I would like to share with you, another role of FAO is to support countries in identifying, piloting, and scaling technologies and innovation adapted to their needs and to their context, recognizing that this is particularly challenging due to the specific constraints faced by the vast number of the world's small-scale producers, including women. To support this role, we are developing a new annual outlook on science, technology, and innovation in agri-food system that is envisaged with a focus on understanding better the level of uptake of technology and innovation at the country level. The tentative title is ATIO, which is an acronym for Agri-Food System Technologies and Innovation Outlook. This could eventually become an FAO flagship report that will monitor development, adoption, and impact of technologies and innovation in agri-food system linked with the relevant SDGs targets. The third one that I would like to share with you is that going forward, FAO must play a lead role in engaging in strategic participatory foresight with regard particularly to emerging technologies and innovation to better prepare for alternative plausible futures and feeding into anticipatory action, as well as in convening the global community, including CGR, including ERCA centers, including the private sector, the civil society, the farmer organization, among others, for constructive dialogue and exchange of knowledge. We are undertaking a study to look at the breakthroughs in technologies and innovation that are expected in the next 10 to 30 years that can contribute toward achieving more efficient, more inclusive, more resilient, and more sustainable agri-food system. So that foresight exercise on technology and innovation will hopefully provide a little bit of a view to all stakeholders of what could happen in the agri-food system and how could we prepare for it now so that we take advantage of science and technologies and innovation and not combat them. So I always give the example of gene editing. Right now, gene editing, it's a technology that is accessible to many, but the ones that use it is the ones that have a clear view on the policies and regulation around it, whereas unfortunately, the least income countries stay away from it, thinking that it's too problematic and too controversial. And maybe that will create or engage or enlarge the gap between South and North. We want to make sure that the South is informed, that the South knows what's coming up, and that they are ready to take advantage of science and technologies and innovation within their context, within their frameworks. Ladies and gentlemen, as several speakers highlighted during the Science Days held in July 2021 in the lead up to the UN Food System Summit, scientists must not talk about, but rather talk with farmers. They should not talk about, but rather talks with indigenous people and other communities. We must improve the convergence between different knowledge systems in research and innovation efforts. To this effect, platforms should be created or strengthened to facilitate collaboration between different knowledge holders in agri-food systems, following the logic of transdisciplinary, going beyond mere interdisciplinary linking different kinds of science. The governance of innovation, the choice of research priorities, and financing of related activities needs to be open to small-scale producers, for them to speak on behalf of their interests as scientists and other actors do. The collaboration among knowledge communities must be established on new ground. GFAR is promoting in its collective action partnership principles that could serve as guidance to partnership quality assessment, measurement leading to more impactful processes for innovation. These principles include setting the agenda together among key protagonists, granting transparent and easy access to information, negotiating and sharing responsibilities effectively, promoting mutual learning through joint activities promotion, enhancing collective research capacities, pooling profits and merits in an equitable manner, disseminating and applying results broadly, and securing outcomes through sustainable co-innovation processes. This must happen in the follow-up to the UN food system, and this also speaks to the important question raised by my co-speaker, Dr. Namukolo Covic, in her article, All Hat and No Cattle, Accountability Following the UN Food System Summit, and who she will be presenting it to us right after my speech. Thank you very much for your attention and looking forward to the presentation of Namukolo. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will quickly share my screen. So in my presentation, I'm going to look at really the first of all, a bravo for the UN Food Systems Summit having taken place, but also to look at what next. What do we do now in terms of the next steps? We've already heard why the UN Food Systems Summit was really launched to start with. Looking at all the challenges that the planet has got in providing better diets, the widespread poor diet prevalence across the entire globe, even in the global north, the climate crisis that we are facing, the significant contributions that food systems actually contribute to climate and environmental challenges, and of course the inequities, the food safety, and the sustainability and livelihood challenges that we need to address. And so drilling into the African continent and looking at where our situation is with respect to malnutrition, we are facing multiple burdens right through the life cycle. For the young, we have the stunting prevalence that is really high, has gone down a little bit, but too slow. And then of course, the pandemic has made things worse. And then at the other extreme, we are also experiencing increasing overweight and obesity. And for adult women, you can see already having prevalences of up to 41% is a lot. And so we're facing multiple burdens of malnutrition. And so the UN Food Systems Summit process, in the way in which it evolved, took two really major trajectories supported by a science group. The first trajectory was through the action tracks, where over 2,000 ideas were submitted as game-changing solutions, and these through a protracted evaluation process, we ended up with 100 game-changing solutions that were later coalesced, and we produced action areas, and then the coalitions that were generated. The second trajectory was through the dialogues, and we had 3 different types of dialogues: country dialogues, independent dialogues where anybody could have launched and produced a dialogue, and then the global dialogues. These also suggested game-changing solutions for the particular context that was discussed in the dialogues, and then wrote dialogue reports. And for countries in particular, they then synthesized what had emerged from the dialogues, but taking into account what came out of the science group and the action tracks to develop country food systems transformation pathways that should actually guide transformation nuanced to country realities. So we have countries have committed and they have produced their pathways. So what do we do now? Where to next? And looking again inward into an African perspective, we really looked at this article, is the one that others were mentioning, on all hat and no cattle. accountability following the UN Food Systems Summit. We really look at the question of, now that we have the plans, you've heard about the Food Systems Coordination Hub at FAO, you've heard about the coalitions, but countries actually want to do something. They've got their pathways. And really the theme I want to pick out of that article for today is the theme of investment, that we need to now invest generously in food systems transformation, and in particular, in the country food systems transformation pathways, that we must invest in diversifying our food basket, invest in improving livelihoods, and invest in sustainable solutions on crops, on livestock, on environment and climate. We must also invest in low-hanging fruit, and we do have some. For example, the dietary patterns based on unhealthy items. If you look at the image on this slide, work done by Imamura and published in Lancet in 2015, green is best in terms of unhealthy practices, and dark orange is the worst. You can see that most of the green is actually on the African continent. But this is what we are losing in the dietary transition that is taking place. And this is what our food systems transformation need to guard against. So these patterns of consumption, we need to understand them better, but we must invest for that to actually happen. We must also invest in ethnographic knowledge gathering approaches. For most part, in a place like Africa, we still have a lot of richness in terms of food biodiversity, but embedded in stories and folklore, proverbs, our customs, our traditional agricultural practices. We could throw them all away in the process of transformation, or find solutions that we could learn from them. I was heartened today when somebody showed me a book that was written on livestock, talking about indigenous knowledge in livestock, looking at selection and adaptability to climate. And it's a book that I will definitely read, because I didn't even know there was such a thing. The other thing we need to look at is invest in One Health approaches. The lesson from COVID-19 is really that we cannot look at one component of our food system in isolation. So we need to look at issues around antimicrobial resistance. We need to look at use of pesticides. We need to look at all these other perspectives that can add to food safety challenges as we move forward. And then our investments should be comprehensive to support transformation on multiple fronts. What crops must we focus on? How do we ensure we do not lose the food biodiversity that we have? How do we integrate livestock and crops to ensure that our mothers and children benefit optimally on nutrition? How do we harvest water from frequent flooding, but also to charge the water tables so that in times of drought, we might have some water reserves? What about processing, storage? How will we feed livestock, for example, in drought situations? How do we improve on resilience? And then we also need to think in terms of things like the fact that livestock, for example, in many parts of Africa, actually walk to the market. What are the challenges that need to be addressed there? All these require sustainable solutions that can be part of this transformation process that we are looking for. Then to give just one example of a specific country food systems pathway, I use the example of Ethiopia, where the pathway has been incorporated into 6 clusters. So each one of these clusters requires attention in terms of investment. And for each one of the low and middle income countries where transformation pathways have been developed, there really needs to be targeted investment taking place for specific actions that have actually been put there so that we can actually realize the transformation that has been planned for. And on this, I would then like to say, yes, the UN Food Systems Summit has gone, but the next step is investing in the diverse sustainable solutions that we need. Thank you.
Thank you both speakers. This was wonderful and really important for us to actually set the context. I'm very grateful for both of you to set the agenda. I want to use the opportunity to get as many questions. And again, if I remind everybody, please send your questions. Some are already coming in. And essentially, I want to set the context for that, because one of the objectives of the Food Systems Summit was, through the summit, the United Nations reaffirms its commitment to promote human rights and to ensure everyone everywhere has opportunities to participate. And I guess that's really the central issue that we have to discuss now. Concrete and measurable actions. How do we measure food system transformation? What are the metrics for that? And I want to come specifically in to ask both speakers to reflect on this. What is the role and what is the opportunity when everyone has to participate for small-scale farmers to be part of the solution, not as beneficiaries, but as co-innovators and as partners? So let me ask Ismahane first if she would reflect on that, the role of small-scale farmers and how this whole system summit is going to be able to facilitate that. And then let me ask the same question for Namukolo to reflect on.
I must say, then I think small-scale farmers, we forget that the majority of food that we are eating comes from those small-scale farmers. So the numbers are very clear. We have more than 80% of the food that is still produced by small-scale farmers. So I always tell people that when you eat something, remember that this has been produced by most probably an old woman in a village somewhere with very little access to resources, with very little access to know-how, with very little access to anything. So really, I think that's very centric in the discussion of UN Food Systems Summit. We can't transform unless those that produce the majority are part of the process, and not are part of the process as people to receive instruction. No, part of the process as a player, as part of designing how we're going to transform agri-food system. So agri-food systems are in many ways very inefficient, and they are very much inefficient because WTO, for example, says that any commodities cross any border at least twice. So it could be that you are producing something, you send it out for miles and miles, increasing your environmental footprint, and it comes back to you much more expensive once it's processed somewhere else. So could we make sure that anything cross the border only once? Could we make sure that we look into the inefficiencies in the global world where we are, and where really the farmers, the small scale producer that we are talking about, say it gets the least return on investment? So I always talk about a graph that once I have seen in my work on the food security in Kuwait, and we were looking at where investment, really the best return on investment is, and you could see that the farmers is the smallest. So things start really being interesting in terms of return on investment post-harvest. So once you have the products, then the processing, it's a better return on investment, then the logistic, and then of course the highest will be at the supermarket. The supermarket does not produce, so why they should have the higher return on investment? The farmers produce for months. There is nothing that you produce overnight. Everything takes a long time, and you are subject to variability in the weather. You have a lot of risks that you are facing as a small-scale farmers. So could we reverse it? This is not logic. If we think about it in all ways, humanitarian, in terms of efforts, in terms of right as well, in terms of efficiency, this is not the right curve. The curve has to be completely upside down. And that's where I think small scale farmers should be present at the table as we are discussing transformation, and should be part of the decision making. And it's their right to get much more higher return on investment so that they can continue producing 80% of the food that we have access to. Over to you, Sayed.
Ismahane, thank you. I want to ask the same question, of course, to Namukolo, but in the context of your paper, which we referred to already, but it in translation to me, because I wasn't aware of this phrase, all hat and no cattle, but it essentially means all talk and no action. And I think what we really have to say now is actionable, concrete, measurable actions that you feel we should be making in this context for small-scale farmers. Maybe you could just elaborate on that, please, Namukolo.
I think, yeah, all action and no, all talk and no action is really the synonym for the phrase. But I think adding to what Dr. Ismahane has indicated is that we tend to think of smallholder farmers as people over there waiting for you to bring solutions to them. They are actually quite innovative. They're producing food, and they're producing food in a changing climate as we speak. And they are grappling with challenges all the time, trying to adapt. In those efforts of trying to adapt, if the solutions that we bring to the smallholder farmers, if the smallholder farmers do not think it actually solves their problems, then it's actually useless. And therefore, as we seek to transform, our actions should be in collaboration with and in consultation with the farmers so that they contribute to the ideas that actually emerge, because the ideas that we then come up with must actually work for them. The other thing is that when we're thinking in terms of the solutions that we're bringing to smallholder farmers, we also need to remember that the farming that they do is for food, yes, and we want to see nutrition outcomes out of it, but we also need to remember that there are livelihoods associated with that. And those livelihoods must be meaningful for them to be able to continue going in the direction that you want them to go. So to be not all talk and no action implies what we do must resonate for the smallholder farmers on the ground. It's through them that we will realize the global transformation that we are looking for. If they do nothing, we actually all die from hunger, essentially. Thank you.
Thank you, Namukolo. And on that alarming but true point, let us pick another issue that we have to address, and GFAR and YPAR particularly are really critically important in this, which is the role of youth. We've talked about small-scale farmers, but without, we have an aging farming population globally. And as farmers get older, we have to be able to say, so who is going to feed us and who is actually going to provide nutritious food that leads to livelihoods for a new generation of farmers. So again, let me ask Ismahane first and then Namukolo to reflect on how we engage with youth, because agriculture is not seen as the most exciting and positive career prospect. Where and how does the United Nations Food System Summit particularly empower youth in the new generation that we will need to feed more people on a hotter planet?
Yeah, absolutely, Sayed. We can't do it without youth. And that's where really the South has an add value right there. If we look at only Africa, for example, many countries, the average age is 15. Most of them are around between 15 and 20. So there is really a large number of youth, particularly in Africa, that really we could attract to agriculture, but also in the North. I mean, if you think about it, even in big countries like Canada and Australia, there is less and less youth interested in agriculture. So I think we have a lot of components that alone are creating disturbance, but together will be a solution. So the young population, the innovation, science and technology, and the need. So I think really what we need to do is bring in the youth, not on the production side only, but on the whole food system. And only if we take the approach of a food system that we could get youth to be interested. A young child in any of the countries wouldn't be maybe interested in the production per se, but I'm sure they are very interested in what is pre-production, the seed sector, the fertilizer sector, the irrigation component. They would be even more interested in the transformation. But to do that, you need a lot of things in place. You have to develop a conducive environment for it. It started by policies, access to finance, access to know-how, access to innovation, training. So I think really, as I said earlier, for me, the large number of youth may be a problem, but really if you use that youth to really to create an agri-food system within the country or in the region, it will not only help you engage the youth and give them very good work, very passionate area where they can give a lot and innovate a lot, but also solve the problem of an aging population in the agri-food system, particularly in certain countries. The other area that I want to really focus on the youth, it's about really not only providing them a voice, and I want to really praise the initiative that we have here at FAO that started by our Director General, Dr. Banshiu, the World Food Forum. The World Food Forum, it's really 100% led by youth. And those youth are voluntary people. So I was impressed last year. I spent a week with them and we did lots of innovation hackathon and what have you, is that it was really voluntary basis by youth. And those youth are very excited about the agri-food system because they see not only they are very interested in nutrition and health and the connection between food and health, but also the nexus of water, food, and energy nexus, but also bringing in innovations. And those innovations are not all technological innovation, but institutional innovation. There are financial innovation. There is science behavior innovations. So really, youth is the solution, and youth has to be fully engaged. If we want to make sure we have access to food in the future, and having access to health through food in the future, we need to engage youth, and we need to do it right away. In the UN Food System pre-summit that happened here in July 2021, it was a wonderful presentation. Really, the best debates were with youth. And even the closing session, there was a young man from Lebanon that was just like wonderful. So there is a power there, there is a potential, there is hope. And we need to hold their hands and bring them along with us and give them the space and the decision-making that they need to have. Over to you, Namukolo.
Yeah, so at the risk of being controversial, I often question when we talk about engaging youth, what exactly are we talking about, and when is the best time to engage the youth? In electronic technologies, in other different things that a lot of young people are interested in, we start them off very young, in primary school already. But when it comes to food production, we wait until they are adults, and then we start saying to them, aren't you interested in this? So the times when people generate interest in different career paths and stuff, we do not expose our youth to agriculture, for example. And this is not just a global south, it's even in the global north. If you go way back, they used to have agricultural activities in schools right through from primary school. People generated interest. But as time has gone, that has fallen away. if you come to the African continent, agriculture was used as punishment. When you do something wrong, you get to go and work in the field. And so when the person gets to university, then you say, don't you want to go and do agriculture? They're not going to be interested. So I think trying to generate this youth engagement, in my view, needs to start much early on in children's lives, and not have everybody introduced to, actually, we need food, we need some people in that corner as well. Agriculture is a vocational type thing. You really have to have an interest in it, and that does not develop overnight. Thank you.
Namukolo, you speak very much from the heart, and is very much a topic that I feel passionately about as well. But I want to pick up with that question specifically to Ismahane, to pick up on the hub. The FAO role is to provide this knowledge hub. And I ask for her to comment on one of your earlier points about Indigenous knowledge, people's perceptions, their own information, their own cultural diversity, and how that will actually be something that the knowledge hub can actually accommodate and encourage and share. And I think this role of youth is critical, but also, of course, of our parents' generations and our generations, that this knowledge is actually part of not just a library of information, but as part of the innovations that we now see. Because effectively, people living in mountain environments are the experts, not us, about how to deal with climate change. How is their knowledge going to be accommodated and encouraged within this knowledge hub, Ismahane?
Thank you, Sayed. The hub normally will have an advisory group. I can't recall what they call it, but a kind of advisory group that they will have their representative from civil society, indigenous group. We're thinking about having the science as well, the science ecosystem as part of the advisory group. So basically, it's an advisory group that will represent all stakeholders, private sector as well. So the indigenous people, particularly, I think the knowledge, the local knowledge and the indigenous knowledge, it's very important as we are going forward. As you said, Sayed, they understand their ecosystem better than anybody else. They have been really living the climate change and adapted to it over years and years and many decades. So it's very important really to capture that know-how, and it's very important to have the indigenous people and the local knowledge with us as we are discussing transformation of the agri-food system, no doubt about it. So we are developing our science and innovation strategy that I mentioned in my speaking points. And within that, we clarify that really, when we talk about science and innovation, it's not all new. Some of it, it's very, very old. It's hundreds of years old, not only few years old. So we have to make sure that there is a way to communicate between us, to talk to each other and to understand. And I always say most of the medicine, as a matter of fact, were discovered because indigenous people use it. We don't know it. So you would know this plant is used for this in this place, for a skin or for something. And then the farmer comes and take the plant and analyze it and find the active component that makes the medicine. So this is how most of the discoveries happens, including aspirin. So it's the indigenous knowledge. It's so important that from it, through science or through analysis, it becomes the pharma, it becomes the corporate. So what we need to do really, but we have lost a lot of it. So we have to make sure there is a communication way, so that their know-how it's used, it's valorized, and it's part of the decision making. Within the hub, I think the best way, it's the advisory group, but there will be the steering committee that I mentioned, and there is the advisory group. So the advisory group, it's a very important table where indigenous and local knowledge has to be well represented. And right now, the hub director, Stefanos, is really looking at how to do it. So it's not yet clear how we're going to do it, but for sure, as it was approved by the DSG and by the steering committee, there is that advisory group that will have seats for Indigenous people and local knowledge people and groups as well. Over to you, Sayed. Thank you.
Thank you. And exactly on that point, I want Namukolo to now have the opportunity to say how it should be done. We've identified the need for Indigenous knowledge. We've identified the purpose of it, but what are the mechanisms? What are the practices? If you now are advising this scientific group, it is scientific group, but of course it's much more than science. How would you now, and you said you want to be provocative, so please be as provocative as you like, to say how this should now be, for you, the next stage, what should be the solution to actually incorporating Indigenous knowledge as part of this process?
Well, science is really an observational process, right? You observe and you make inferences from your observations, then you try new things. So Indigenous knowledge has actually been built over hundreds of years of observations that have taken place. What distinguishes it from what we are calling science is that we write things down and we want to standardize and the like. So not paying attention to that Indigenous knowledge is actually to our peril. If you look, for example, at the African continent, where is the drought resistance going to come from? Where are the genetic materials going to come from to help us mitigate against the changing climate? It's really going to come from the food biodiversity that we have got. However, that knowledge is not written down anywhere. It's dying with our mothers and grandparents. And so what do we need to do? We actually need, like I said in my presentation, we actually need to invest in accessing that knowledge and actually, before it gets lost, as it is, we've already lost a lot of it. Some of the discoveries that Dr. Ismahane was referring to came from observations, and then somebody said, actually, I have another set of skills. I can look at what is inside this plant that is actually causing this. If that plant is not there, we will never discover that. And so I think what we need to do as part of the transformation process is invest in harnessing that knowledge so that it is not lost, so that it can be a continuing resource for the transformation process. ILORI has gene banks that they are managing. And I want to use that as an example to say, with those gene banks, they are preserving genetic materials. If you don't do that, as the climate is changing, we probably won't have that genetic material. So where are we going to find the genetic resources for the adaptation that we will need to continue doing as the climate changes? That gene bank when we talk in terms of Indigenous knowledge, it's not captured in a way that it is put in a document. It's in people's heads. And so we must invest in actually harnessing that knowledge before it is lost. And that should be part of what we do towards transformation. Thank you.
I may say it to jump in, just to add to what Namukolo said. It's really, I mean, we need also to help the Indigenous people and the local people to take their ideas forward. So when you get educated at the university, you know how to make a business case and make business out of it. What about if we give them the tools to do it at the local level? So they know about certain insects that are using for ABC or plants or their really history and their heritage. So we need to help them really develop it in a product that could make it to the market. So they develop it again, whatever it is, the value chain is needed at the local level. So it's a really, I like very much the benefit sharing aspects of the ITPR, the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources, but we don't have it everywhere. So we need that benefit sharing to be much more global, much more international. But also we need maybe to provide ways and means for these people to develop that whatever process is at the local level. So I still, and believe me, I remember when I first finished my PhD, the first job I got was data mining, and it was at that time in genomics, whereby companies hired people to just look at ideas within and sequences within the public databases to find certain things that they can make a business out of it. The same thing, there is people that are just mining ideas and collecting this information and making a business in another place. So what if we provide tools to have that business at the local level, so it's benefiting those people that actually created, as Namukolo said, from their organizational processes over hundreds of years.
And Saeed, just one last thing, building on that, is that we need to also, I think one of the areas that needs attention is for us to value the biodiversity that we actually have, for example, on the African continent. It becomes valuable when somebody comes back to us now with a patent on, and then they tell you, you can't grow that anymore because now we've got a patent for it. But that should not be already as part of our transformation process. We really need to instill that us actually appreciating the value of what we have. And that should be part of our education system. We shouldn't discover it way back when we are now almost retiring. It should be part of the genetics of our education system, if you will.
I have written a book specifically about that, but that's separate. I want to just, and this has been very rich and very, very stimulating. We could talk for a long time, and I know many of us will continue this conversation, but I want both speakers now to reflect on the GFAR audience and the community that are primarily listening and participating in this, want to know specifically, when we talk about actions, when we say concrete and legally binding actions and accountability, I think one of the definitions of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. How are we going to do this? And if both speakers, and I'll ask Namukolo first, what is the first action? What is your priority now on reflection after the United Nations Food System Summit that you think should be the first and most important thing that we do if we are going to what its achievement, its ambition is to transform agri-food systems? What is your first action that you actually believe that we should now focus on?
I think the first action is to look at those transformation plans that the countries have developed. A lot of thought went into it in people trying to figure out how can we transform. They must not now remain as documents. So we should really say, what are we going to do next, and make actual plans on how we are going to actually get that transformation. Then look at what investments do we actually need on the different actions that are in there. Quite a number, if I can give the Ethiopia one that I am most familiar with, there are specifically actions that have actually been put there. They have developed a 10-year roadmap associated with the action plan. And really what is needed is investment to begin to realize that. And then in addition to that, then the development partners need to really rally around those transformation plans to say, perhaps repurpose some of the work that they are doing to actually help realize those transformation plans that have been made. So for me, that would be concrete, somewhere to start, is the plans that are already in place now so that we can realize them.
Thank you. Ismahane, last comment from you on these actions and priorities.
I'll say that I think for me, it's looking at diversification. I think the solution for us as we are thinking about agri-food system is diversification. Diversification at all levels, diversification of stakeholders, diversification of cropping system, agricultural system, diversification of players. So I think really for me, it is diversification, and it is also lining up the agricultural production system with the market and looking at the efficiency that I mentioned before. So I think sometimes we are carried out in many ways, and it seems impossible to stop and look back and say, no, we took the wrong path, let's back up and change the system. And that's where we are with the globalization right now. So I think we need really to look and provide those data on efficiency. For me, for example, I worked on quinoa. It doesn't make sense that the farmer is getting $4 per kilo. And then when you buy your quinoa as a chips, which is 5% actually of what you are eating, is quinoa, it's about $50 a kilo. So why? It doesn't make sense. So there is a lot of things that are happening at the processing level, at the multimedia, at the multi-companies and the globalization and the centralization of certain things and then dispatching. So there's a lot of inefficiencies that we need really to have a hard look at it. We need to back it up with data so that we do transformation properly. And as we are doing transformation, we should keep in mind that nature is diversified for a reason, because everything is interconnected and we are in a symbiosis most of the time. So we are helping each other as species, and we need to keep it that way. Over to you, Sayed. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me take this opportunity personally and on behalf of everyone participating to thank both the speakers. This has been a very rich and very stimulating discussion, but of course it's identifying challenges that we must all face together. And I think that point about diversity is really the key to the challenges ahead. Now, I want to, before, with Ravi's permission, ask if Jenna Tesdell can say a little bit just on behalf of YPAR, because one of the commitments of the United Nations Food System Summit is to actually include other constituency leaders. And if I may say, Jenna is a constituency leader for young people in agricultural development. So I'm going to ask Jenna just to say a few words, just as a reflection on our discussion. And then I'm going to ask Ravi to make some final comments. Jenna.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Saeed, for the introduction. And thank you so much to GFAR for partnering with YPAR for this GFAR talk, because I think that's one of the best ways that we can include young people, is to include youth networks, youth organizations that are out there, that are active. We're working hard, and we want to work with you to bring our voices in and also work together on these issues that we're all talking here about today, about getting younger folks, children, young people, all different types of stakeholder groups involved. And so we just want to speak a huge thank you to GFAR for the ongoing collaboration, and also to the speakers here today who have touched on different stakeholder groups, not only youth, also Indigenous people, women, and that's what it's all about for YPAR. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Let me ask Ravi to say a final few words and reflect while he can on this discussion. But just to remind all participants, this will be available on YouTube by Friday of this week. Please can I ask you to make it, bring it to the attention of your colleagues, whatever level, so that this discussion can actually continue with as wide an audience and participation as possible. And we will come back to the issue because, of course, it's central to the principles and objectives of GFAR. So this is an underpinning principle. But please do get this information out, which we will put on social media, so that as many people as possible see the YouTube edition of this talk. Ravi, if you'd like to say a few concluding comments, please do.
Sorry. Thank you, Sayed. At the outset, am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sayed. Well, at the outset, I must say, we had excellent presentations by two charming and intellectually charged women who really had given us challenges and opportunities of transformation of agri-food system in a very simplified way. Though the challenges are not simple, of course. So we got a clear picture in both the presentations, how the UNFSS evolved with the cross-fertilization of ideas of the science group and the dialogues, and how the FAO Innovation Hub now has taken charge on behalf of the UN system, all the agencies to really move forward with their strategies of science, innovation, and technology, focusing on probably in future on the genome editing and so on. And also we got a very good case study of Ethiopia, where we see some plans have come and roadmap has come up, and there's some ideas, excellent ideas, which came from both Dr. Ismahane Elouafi and Dr. Namukolo Covic. Thank you, both of you, for this very amazing presentation. And I'm sure all the participants must be quite clear of the cloudy ideas they had about UNFSS and how it is going to move ahead. Now, my own reflections on the excellent presentations and discussions and moderation done by Syed are few which I would like to share. Number one, I represent GFAR, and this is a GFAR talk. And both of you, Dr. Ismahane and Dr. Covic, you have shown us how we can walk the talk. It was walking the talk which GFAR talk actually began with. You gave a clear pathway, ideas and all. But having said that, I find there are a lot of challenges before the FAO Innovation or Food System Coordination Hub and before any agency who are really going to move forward with diversification, multi-stakeholder participation, small-scale farmers being at center stage, and so many things. The challenges which are generic, I would like to come to that. Number one is, I got the idea from the article of Dr. Covic, Namukolo Covic, where she beautifully talks about the accountability mechanism. And she has talked about the global accountability. And I would just like to add here, because that gives an idea, it is not accountability only at the UN level, it is practically accountability at the local level, which I thought I must add. If we realize that accountability at the local level, after having a big accountability, all dissected, presented with funding, convergence, action plan, and everything, I think that needs to percolate at the local level, at the ground level, to the civil society, to the farmers, where we can look for solutions. And those solutions, I'm sure, will not be same what we may be proposing from FAO or from any agency in the world, because those solutions will come from the civil society, from the farmers. That is where the indigenous knowledge on this given factor has to be captured and capitalized and used in the way forward. Second point I want to say is, even in GFAR, we talk a lot, farmer at the center stage, and researchers need to have a change of mindset and perceptions and all. Who is going to do it? We don't have a mechanism in GFAR. We talk a lot. That is our mission. We just don't have. We can't keep farmers to a stage where they will go and convince the government to write science projects, have a say in it. It is going to take many years to happen. And I believe that is very crucial agenda. GFAR has taken a very heavy responsibility on it. So we will see how we move ahead. Because practically it comes to the changing the mindset of the so-called highly educated people like all of us here, PhDs and masters and all, how we change our mindset to really change our own perceptions to allow farmers, how the donors really come forward to take suggestions from farmers, how, like Dr. Ismahane said, we should not talk about farmers, we should talk with farmers. I really like that statement. I think I'm going to use it more often. This is a wonderful way, but my question is how we are going to do it. How that mechanism for me is very, very crucial. It is a very heavy agenda for GFAR. And we will see, we will debate about it. We will have our national, regional meetings, workshops, we'll talk about it. What are people's perception? Because we need to walk the talk, as I say, because GFAR's aim, as you all know, is collective action. And ultimately, whatever we do, finally, it is collective action. Though we have a narrow domain of working right now because of limitations of staff and funding and all, we just do for inclusive digital transformation, forgotten food, family farming, or maybe going to start on education sector and so on. But there are many, many more challenges. I see all the outputs of the UNFSS completely, purely converging with the GFAR philosophy and GFAR mindset and GFAR action plan, though GFAR is a small, modest organization. But yes, that really highlights the importance of and the responsibilities what we have in the coming years. Another point I would like to say is about the other UN agencies to be involved. I think I was the first man in the world who knocked at UNESCO's door to look at agriculture, higher agriculture education system. We went to the UNESCO office in Bangkok. We prepared a complete project for improving the higher education sector's education system in agriculture here in Asia and Pacific. We did a lot of work there with a consultant. It was very difficult for UNESCO, which is meant for education. Very difficult to penetrate in their mindset that agriculture education has some little importance in the overall game of education. We zoom, we are in FAO or agriculture, we zoom a lot. When we go out, that is a scenario we see. So the mindset of all these agencies are very important. We finally managed to get our project in with UNESCO as a partner with ASEAN Trust Fund. It could not take off for other political reasons that I may not like to deliberate. My point here is changing the mindset of the top level people, changing the mindset of the researchers, and bringing all the accountability mechanism at the local level. And before doing that, bringing the awareness on the accountability. Because we all are living our life. There is morning, there is evening, the next day is coming. Where is the awareness on the accountability? That is another challenge I see which FAO's coordination hub is going to face. It will make excellent strategies and all will come up, I'm sure. But the point will be, I think FAO needs to be saluted for that. And the innovation team needs to be saluted. And I will appreciate Dr. Ismahane here. I'm sure she must be thinking how she can bring the innovative funding mechanism for all the points we are talking about. The innovative funding mechanism will be very crucial along with the innovative ideas of innovation and strategies of science and technology to bring forward. So we also touched upon the engagement of youth that goes beyond saying. And when we talk of youth, it is either the farmers or it is the education sector where we need a very active engagement. But in the education sector, we are not seeing much happening where right from the beginning, we could really teach them about SDGs and where we are reaching and all. I was seeing a report from United Nations Economic, Social and Cultural Association of Asia and Pacific, UNESCAP here in Bangkok. They say Asia Pacific is not even halfway to the SDGs, reaching the SDGs in the years where the target was. And then COVID-19 came, we had the COP26, we had the CVD COP15, all highlighted that we are surely not able to achieve the SDGs. That is very clear. But that is not an issue. The issue is a midterm correction there. And do what is doable. But the way to sum up, I would say the UN Food Security Summit, which has been very properly dissected, analyzed, and given a way forward, I believe it is an excellent repackaging of the thoughts and ideas in a very comprehensive, cohesive, and innovative way for moving ahead. And this, I think, really needs to be made aware at the local level. I insist again, though at higher level, yes, we have the best of brains. We do appreciate that. But change can happen only if we go at the ground level. With this, I would like to stop here. I would like to thank my colleague Hildegard for really conceiving and initiative this GFAR talk. Despite a Zoom bombing, unfortunate, which we had, we could finally make it. I would like to thank Hildegard's all team who worked very hard to make sure that this time there is absolutely no calamity to really spoil the show. And my very personal thanks to Dr. Sayed for really moderating the show in such a way. And finally, Dr. Ismahane and Dr. Namukolo. You both really are the role models for the women community in the world. And not to speak of Jenna, who herself is as a youth role model. With this, I would like to thank all of you. Thank you. And close the GFAR talk.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, everybody. That's been very stimulating. And my thanks again to everyone for participating. Good day.